up, guys? I apologize. It's been forever since I've made a YouTube video where I'm actually talking, presenting information, or really even sharing something that I feel like could be valuable to somebody else. So apologize for that. I just feel like I struggle doing this because A, it feels like I'm just doing it for myself, which whatever, is fair and valid. But two, I also feel like a little bit of like imposter syndrome. You know, I like do a lot of legit work, and I feel like over the last several years, I'm definitely growing as a DP, as a producer, as a filmmaker, but it always feels like not legit in comparison to like the people that I aspire to be are doing. So I always feel weird coming on here and like sharing things, but whatever. I personally don't like gatekeeping in the filmmaking community, and so I want to try to pull that out and share what I can. And today's topic is storytelling. I feel like overall storytelling kind of gets a like second, third string role for a lot of people when they're first beginning. They're just trying to think about, how do I get this lighting? What camera should I shoot on? What lens is best? But ultimately, I think storytelling is the real reason why you're filming something in the first place. And I think a lot of people sometimes get caught up on how to tell their story and how to use all these technical things that we like to talk about with film to tell a better story. So I'm gonna walk you through sort of what I do to not only just identify a story, but then to kind of help flush things out, and what my process is when I get a new project from sort of beginning to end, and what am I doing to kind of craft the stories that I'm telling. So number one is like identifying what's the story that you want to tell. And that's not always the easiest thing to identify or to talk about or to like find. I generally use, we'll call it 5 questions to set the stage for myself in terms of what I'm gonna film. And that is who, what, where, when, why. And then you can throw in things like how are you gonna film it? But that's like, at that point you have a story. The first, who, you can split a couple different ways, but the most obvious is, who is your story about? And some people come to the table with a pitch, you know, already like kind of molded out. They know the conflict, they know the arc. They're just trying to find an individual that fits that arc, that character that fits that arc. On the other side, you may know somebody in your community that you work with, somebody that you've read about that you think has a really inspiring story. And so finding that person and then finding the journey within that person is part of the who. Another part of the who is also, you know, this is a little more niche, but like, who's this video for? Is it for you? Is it for athletes? Is it for, you know, is it a product? So is it for a marketplace? Is it to move people in a certain direction? Trying to think about what you're making is going to be used and who the who is as part of that. Who the who. What's your film about? What is the conflict? And you don't need to overthink this and have some 4-page document, book, novel, whatever about what is the film about. Of course you can, but at the end of the day, if you had to summarize in 1 sentence or 3 sentences, like a topic sentence, what is your film about? What's the conflict? That's one of the most helpful things for me when I'm thinking about what is this story about. At the end of the day, you've got the who, and then you have what. What is it about? What do you want to say with this story that you're trying to tell? Where, obviously, is where's this taking place? And it's not just literally where, but where in time. And then also thinking about, you know, from a pre-production standpoint, like, where are you going to need access to? Where are you going to want to film? So you can sort of think about in your ideation phase before you go to pitch, whether it's just for the person that you want to make the story about or to somebody who's going to help fund your project, where are you going to need access to? And then that can help you kind of line up contacts or just locations ahead of time that you can kind of come to the table already with. When does this take place? And when in this character's journey are you starting the story? Are you starting at the beginning? Are you starting at the end and making your way back? Are you starting in the middle and kind of telling both sides? You know, not all stories are linear from beginning to end. Sorry, this chair is really squeaky. Really apologize if that's like getting in people's ear. But like, how are you getting from point A to point B? And when does whatever action take place in a person's life? Anyway, okay, so now that you have all of that information, you can move on to identifying what is the conflict. And conflict can be really broad, and it can also be super niche and specific. But in my opinion, conflict is where character comes out. You can show your character, you can show somebody's character through them working through conflict. And all good stories have conflict. This isn't like a dramatic effect, but people going from point A to point B without some kind of obstacle or resistance. Like, when in your life do you ever do that? Even if you're going outside on a walk right now, you have the cold. I'm sure people either love the cold or they hate the cold. There's a conflict. So what is your conflict? And identifying how do you reveal things about somebody through that conflict? Or what does that conflict reveal about that person that then could be projected on the audience as well? There's a lot of different ways you can sort of structure this, and like kind of pulling from, like, if you have like a literary background, you can literally put people as person versus environment, person versus industry, person versus person, person versus self. What, from a very basic starting point, where does your conflict begin? And then kind of flush out the details from that. I think that's really helpful for me in thinking about not just why am I making this piece, but also like, what do I want to say in this? I, as the creator, also probably have conflicts that, as somebody who's making this film, can put into that if it is appropriate. It's also helpful just to check in with yourself and check in like with your humanity. Like, how are other people going to resonate with this? Conflict is one of the things that people look at and empathize with, and that's what gets them hooked on your message. So I think conflict's really important in just building an audience for the piece that you want to create. What is the arc of the story? And sort of counterintuitive, I think that it's really helpful to start from the back and make your way forward. And particularly in nonfiction, right? Organizing your production schedule sort of with an idea of key events that your character may need, you may want to be present for, is super helpful in timing your shoot. You know, so there is a logistical part to this, but there's also a sort of component that allows you to think ahead of all the stuff that you're gonna get. So if you know that you're shooting an athlete and they have a huge competition 9 months down the line, you know already just from how that ends, right? You don't know like what the actual ending, whether they're gonna place, whether they're gonna PR, whether they're gonna get injured. You don't know ahead of time, you know, like what that's gonna be, but you can structure your shoot so that you're getting the training sessions, you're getting the moment before the race where they're maybe nervous, or they're having second guesses, or they're having intimate like moments with their family and vulnerability and all that stuff. You can plan your production schedule ahead of time so that you're picking up those key moments in your story that then kind of let the audience in more on that person's journey, which I think a lot of conflict doesn't just show up in one key instance, it's kind of consistent. So starting backwards and then making your way forward from that to your starting place, I think can be really helpful. And so the next part, I think, in like the pre-production cycle, now that you know sort of where you start and where you end, it's time to kind of map out the whole process. And this is where pre-production can get kind of complicated. For me personally, I use a program that's called Milanote, and this is not an advertisement. Like, I'm not There's millions of programs to go out and do this kind of thing with. However, I use Milanote because I just think it's really intuitive, it's flexible, all the tools are there for scheduling, for visual creation, it's organized, and I'm not an organized person, but it helps me stay organized, which is a value add for me. I think the next phase really is mapping out your pre-production. What are your visual references? Where do you want to pull inspiration from? How are you gonna shoot the piece? What kind of interview setups do you wanna have? What kind of questions are you gonna ask if this is a question-heavy piece? Really, if you're working with other people, this is a place where you can come together and ideate together. What look are you going for? Is it vintage? Is it film? Is it digital? Is it on a tripod? Is movement important? What are the inspiration pieces, if you have any, that you're pulling from to make this? You can sort of explode in this phase of the production at the beginning and then start to structure it in a way that makes sense so that you have a full journey fleshed out from point A to point B. Maybe if you're doing interviews and you don't quite know what the content is yet, mapping out ahead of time sort of an idea of what you want that person to say, and you can do, like for me, I do pre-interviews. So I will meet with people, organize ahead of time, have a conversation with them so that I know ahead of time enough of what their story is to be prepared to make something. I can build on a foundation of information that I've already collected ahead of time and that I've organized in my pre-production phase to get the result that I want, or to get something deeper, to get something more vulnerable. And then you have actually production. And production for me is a lot of different things, and being in nonfiction, often I'm shooting verite, run and gun, there's so much stuff that can go wrong, or just people don't show up on time, or things get delayed, or whatever. So just having a roadmap ahead of time allows me to kind of stay chill in those moments where shit hits the fan and I'm like, well, I don't know where to go next. I do know, I have a roadmap, I've planned, I've thought about things. Now I can be intentional with things when they don't go to my plan. In production too, another thing that I think about when I'm thinking about telling a story is what is the relationship of the camera to the character? Is it an extension to their inner life? Is the composition that I'm having part of the subtext of the conflict that that person is having? How am I using movement, right? And I do a lot of handheld work. How am I using movement intentionally to extrapolate emotion that that character is going through? So thinking about really cinematography, especially in for me, it's a lot, it's like a dance. You know, there's a push, there's a pull. And the camera is very much a character, whether it's its own character, whether it is an extension to the subtext of what is currently happening or the environment. The camera is very much a character in a lot of the work that I do. And that's kind of how I think about motion, movement, framing, composition, is what is it saying about the inner life of the person that the story is about or that the environment is taking place in. And I think that that's just useful overall, not necessarily gonna make you tell a better story, but I think at the end of the day, it's not just an effect, it has a purpose. You know, framing somebody so that there's a bunch of layers that point to them can help them, and shooting it wide makes them feel small. Alternatively, being super close up and moving things slowly to kind of pan down and watch somebody write something and then pulling back up to them is so much more intimate, vulnerable, soft. You can see that there's weight. You know, that feels, it elicits a feeling. So all of those things aren't just because, you know, somebody randomly chose that. It's intentional. And the last thing I think of, and this is really for me for post, is building a world around the piece that I'm in. I used to shy away from sound effects, but now sound effects litter my pieces.
How do you answer the call to the wild? The feeling that even the tiniest molecule is in sync and your movement is the symphony, grounded by the pull of gravity. When dusk has reached its boiling point and sun-drawn colors paint themselves against the sky, the world is an infinite place to change to be changed, and to do it all again tomorrow. Commonwealth Joe, award-winning coffee, unrivaled passion and innovation.
I will, if I'm showing something outside and I'm not getting scratch audio, I will put something in that helps you feel like you're outside. If there's an ocean, making sure that there's waves in the background, a seagull, a bout of thunder, some wind, stuff that really invites the viewer into the world that you are trying to build, that can also highlight some of the subtext of the story that's going on. And I think that's what sound design is. It's an extension to making things feel more real, to feel more intentional. So those are my tips and tricks, and that's kind of my process. Once getting feedback from that is really important, but I find that as long as I'm being intentional and knowing where and what kind of world that I'm building and what the conflict is, it just clears a lot of things up for me. So I want to hear from you guys. If you found that this information was helpful or inspiring or whatever, please let me know. Like, comment, subscribe. Also, I want to know what kind of projects you guys are working on 2024. Like, is there anything that you guys want to see? Something that you want to talk about? Please also let me know that. I'm happy to share whatever information I can from the kind of work that I do. Again, I don't want to gatekeep, and like I'm always frustrated when I feel like things are a secret or that you have to pay for something. So let's keep communication open, and yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. Winter is always a very challenging time of the year for me. Things slow down, like work-wise, but then also like I just struggle with the cold weather being on the East Coast. So anyway, I hope you guys are taking care of yourself. Thank you for watching if you've made it this far, and yeah, I'll catch you next time.